Hello, welcome to another edition of I Didn't Know That. This week's IDKT is based on the book by Dave Hunt. And this is the conclusion of our mini-series of Paganism in the Church. Hi, my name is Brent Winfield. And our theme Bible text today is, Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Matthew 6:21. You know, Jesus, the founder of Christianity, was the poorest of the poor. Yet, Roman Catholicism, which claims to be his church, is the richest of the rich, the wealthiest institution on earth. How come that such an institution, ruling in the name of the Son of God, whose want was such that he had not even an earthly pillow upon which to rest his head, is now so top-heavy with riches that she can rival, indeed, she can put to shame the combined might of the world's biggest financial institutions and the world's largest multinational supergiants, and of the most prosperous global corporations in the world. Friend, this is a question that has long echoed along the somber corridors of history during almost 2,000 years, a question that has puzzled, bewildered, and angered in turn untold multitudes from the first centuries to our days. The startling contradiction of the tremendous riches of the Roman Catholic Church with the direct teachings of Christ is too glaring to be passed by and tolerated or even ignored by the most indifferent of believers. Revelation 17:9 says, And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains upon which the church sitteth. Revelation 17:18. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Yes, a woman rides the beast, and that woman is a city built on 7 hills that reigns over the kings of the earth. Was ever in all of history such a statement made? John immediately equates the reader's acceptance of this revelation with wisdom. Friend, we dare not pass over such a disclosure casually. It merits our careful and prayerful attention. Here is no mystical or allegorical language, but an unambiguous statement in plain words. The woman is that great city. There is no justification for seeking some other hidden meaning. Yet books have been written and sermons preached insisting that Mystery Babylon is the United States. That is clearly not the case. For the U.S. is a country, not a city. One might justifiably refer to the United States as Sodom, considering the honor she now gives to homosexuals. But the U.S. is definitely not the Babylon that John sees in this vision. The woman is a city. Furthermore, she is a city built on 7 hills. That specification eliminates ancient Babylon. Only one city has for more than 2,000 years been known as a city on 7 hills. That city is Rome. The Catholic Encyclopedia states, it's within the city of Rome, called the City of 7 Hills, that the entire area of Vatican State proper is now confined. There are, of course, other cities such as Rio de Janeiro that were built on 7 hills. Therefore, John provides at least 7 more characteristics to limit the identification to Rome alone. Now let's list them briefly now. We'll discuss each one in turn. As we shall see, there is only one city in the earth, which, in both historical and contemporary perspectives, passes every test John gives, including its identification as Mystery Babylon. That city is Rome, and more specifically, Vatican City. Babylon is a synonym for Rome. It's used 6 times in the last book of the Bible, Revelation. 4 of the 6 are in chapters 17 and 18. Mystery is at the very heart of Roman Catholicism, as we discussed in last Sunday's I Didn't Know That video letter. From the words mysterium fide, pronounced at the alleged transformation of the bread and wine into the literal body and blood of Christ, to the enigmatic apparitions of Mary around the world, Every sacrament, from baptism to extreme unction, manifests the mysterious power which the faithful must believe the priests wield, but for which, of course, there is no visible evidence. Rome's New Catechism explains that the liturgy aims to initiate souls into the mystery of Christ. It is mystagogy, and that all of the church liturgy is mystery. Here's the question: who is the whore? The first thing we're told about the woman is that she's a whore, Revelation 17:1. That earthly kings have committed fornication with her, verse 2. And that all the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication, verse 3. Now, why would a city be called a whore and be accused of having committed fornication with kings? Such an indictment would never be made of London or Moscow or Paris or any other ordinary city. It just wouldn't make sense. Fornication and adultery are used in the Bible in both the physical and spiritual sense. Let's take, for example, of Jerusalem. God said, "How is the faithful city become a harlot?" Found in Isaiah 1:21. Israel, whom God had set apart from all other people to be holy for his purposes, had entered into unholy, adulterous alliances with the idol-worshipping nations about her. The entire chapter of Ezekiel 16 explains Israel's spiritual adultery in detail, both with heathen nations and with their false gods, as do many other passages. There is no way that a city could engage in literal fleshly fornication. Thus, we can only conclude that John, like the prophets in the Old Testament, is using the term in its spiritual sense. The city, therefore, must claim a spiritual relationship with God. Otherwise, such an allegation would be meaningless. Though it's built on 7 hills, there would be no reason to accuse Rio de Janeiro of spiritual fornication. It makes no claim of having a special relationship with God. And though Jerusalem has that relationship, it cannot be the woman riding on the beast, for it's not built on 7 hills, nor does it meet the other criteria by which this woman is to be identified. So, against only one other city in history could a charge of fornication be leveled. That city is Rome, and more specifically, Vatican City. She claims to have been the worldwide headquarters of Christianity since its beginning, and maintains that claim to this very day. Her Pope, enthroned in Rome, claims to be the exclusive representative of God, the Vicar of Christ. Rome is the headquarters of the Roman Catholic Church, and in that too she is unique. Numerous churches, of course, are headquarters in cities, but only one city is the headquarters of a church. The Mormon Church, for example, is headquartered in Salt Lake City, but there is much more to Salt Lake City than the Mormon Church. Not so with Vatican City. It is the heartbeat of the Roman Catholic Church and nothing else. She is a spiritual entity that could very well be accused of spiritual fornication if she did not remain true to Christ. So not only does Rome's Pope call himself the Vicar of Christ, but the church he heads claims to be the one true church and the bride of Christ. Christ's bride, whose hope is to join her bridegroom in heaven, is to have no earthly ambitions. Yet, the Vatican is obsessed with earthly enterprise, as history proves. And in the furtherance of these goals, it has been exactly as John foresaw in his vision, engage in adulterous relationships with the kings of the earth. That fact is acknowledged even by Catholic historians. Christ said to his disciples, "If you were of the world would love his own. But because you are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you." Found in John 15:19. The Catholic Church, however, is very much of this world. Her popes have built an unrivaled worldwide empire of property, wealth, and influence. Nor is empire building an abandoned feature of the past. The Vatican clearly states that the Roman Catholic Church today still ceaselessly seeks to bring under its control all mankind and all their goods. Popes have long claimed dominion of the world and its peoples. Pope Gregory XI, papal bull of 1372, claimed papal dominion over the entire Christian world, secular and religious, and excommunicated all who failed to obey the popes and to pay them taxes. This was confirmed by subsequent popes, and in 1568, Pope Pius V swore it would remain an eternal law. Pope Alexander VI, from 1492 to 1503, claimed that all undiscovered lands belonged to the Roman pontiff, for him to dispose of as he pleased in the name of Christ as his vicar. As a matter of fact, one pope claiming to own the world drew a north-south line down the global map of that day, giving everything in the east to Portugal and everything in the west to Spain. Thus, by papal grant, Africa went to Portugal and the Americas to Spain. See, when Portugal succeeded in reaching India and Malaya, they secured the information of these discoveries for the papacy. Friend, the intent was to bring the inhabitants, all the people, to profess the Catholic faith. It was largely Central and South America, which, as a consequence of this unholy alliance between church and state, had Roman Catholicism forced upon them by the sword, and remained Catholic to this very day. Now, North America, with the exception of Quebec and Louisiana, was spared the dominance of Roman Catholicism because it was settled largely by Protestants. Christ said, "My kingdom is not of this world, otherwise my servants would fight." The popes, however, have fought with armies and navies in the name of Christ to build a huge kingdom which is very much of this world, and to amass their earthly empire, they have repeatedly engaged in spiritual fornication with emperors, kings, and princes. Claiming to be the bride of Christ, the Roman Catholic Church has been in bed with godless rulers down through history, and these adulterous relationships continue to this day. You know, friend, some individuals may object that it is Rome and not that small part of it known as the Vatican City, which is built in 7 hills, and that the Vatican can hardly be called a great city. Though both objections are true, the words Vatican and Rome are universally used interchangeably. Just as one would refer to Washington and mean the government that runs the United States, so one refers to Rome and means the hierarchy that rules the Roman Catholic Church. So closely are Catholicism and Rome linked that the Catholic Church is known as the Roman Catholic Church, or simply the Roman Church. Moreover, for more than 1,000 years, the Roman Catholic Church exercised both religious and civil control over the entire city of Rome and its surroundings. For example, Pope Innocent III abolished the secular Roman Senate and placed the administration of Rome directly under his command. The Pope's authority even extended to large territories outside Rome acquired in the 8th century. At that time, with the help of a deliberately fraudulent document manufactured for the popes, known as the Donation of Constantine, Pope Stephen III convinced Pepin, king of the France, and who was the father of Charlemagne, that territories recently taken by the Lombards from the Byzantines actually had been given to the papacy by the Emperor Constantine. Pepin routed the Lombards and handed the Pope the keys to about 20 cities, including Ravenna, Ancona, Bologna, Ferrara, Lecce, Gubbio, and so on, along with the huge chunk of land adjoining them along the Adriatic coast. Dated 30 March 315, the donation declared that Roman Constantine, emperor, had given these lands along with Rome and the Lateran Palace to the popes in perpetuity. In 1440, this document was proven to be a forgery. It's still recognized as a forgery by historians today. Yet, allegedly infallible popes continued for centuries to assert that the donation was genuine, and on that basis to justify their pomp, power, and possessions. That fraud is still perpetuated by an inscription found in the baptistry of Rome's St. John's Lateran, which has never been corrected. Thus, the papal states were literally stolen by the popes from their rightful owners. The papacy controlled and taxed these territories and derived great wealth from them until the year 1848. September 1860, over his raging protests, Pius IX eventually lost all of the papal states to the new, finally united Kingdom of Italy, which left him at the time of the First Vatican Council in 1870 still in control of Rome and its surroundings. Here's the point, friend. The point is that, exactly as John foresaw in his vision, a spiritual entity that claimed a special relationship with Christ and with God became identified with a city that was built on 7 hills, Rome. That woman committed spiritual fornication with earthly rulers and eventually reigned over them. The Roman Catholic Church has been continuously identified with that city. Hence, one understands the central place of Rome in the life of the Church today, and the significance of the title Roman Catholic Church, the Church that is universal, yet focused upon the ministry of the Bishop of Rome, or the Pope. Since the beginning, Rome has been the center of all Christendom. Now, let's move on. Let's discuss the Church's wealth from ill-gotten gain. The incredible wealth of this woman caught John's attention next. This woman, she was dressed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of fornication. Read this in Revelation 17:4. In a previous I Didn't Know That, we looked at the colors of purple and scarlet, which once again identifies the woman with both pagan and Christian Rome. These were the colors of the Roman Caesars, with which the soldiers mockingly robed Christ as king. See Matthew 27:28 and John 19:2-5. See, the Vatican took these colors to herself. The woman's colors are literally still the colors of the Catholic clergy. The Catholic Encyclopedia describes it. The caps magna is a cloak with a long train and a hooded shoulder cape. It was purple wool for bishops. For cardinals, it was scarlet, purple for bishops and other prelates, and for the Pope, it was red velvet for Christmas matins, red serge at other times. The golden cup or chalice in her hand again identifies the woman with the Roman Catholic Church. Broderick's edition of the Catholic Encyclopedia declares of the chalice, quote, "This chalice is the most important of the sacred vessels. It may be of gold or silver, and if the latter, then the inside must be surfaced with gold." End quote. The Roman Catholic Church possesses many thousands of solid gold chalices kept in its churches around the world. Even the blood-stained cross of Christ cannot be compared, because the crosses of the church has gems studded all over it. The Catholic Encyclopedia says, and I quote, "The pectoral cross suspended by a chain around the neck and worn by the breast by abbots, bishops and archbishops, cardinals, and the Pope should be made of gold and decorated with gems." And I end that quote. Friend, Rome has practiced evil to gather her wealth. The golden cup is filled with abominations and filthiness. Much of the wealth of the Roman Catholic Church was acquired through the confiscation of the property of the pitiful victims of the Inquisitions. Even the dead were exhumed to face trial, and property was taken from them and from their heirs by the church. The punishments of the Inquisition did not cease when the victim was burned to ashes or immured for life in the Inquisition's dungeons. The poor person relatives were reduced to beggary by the law, that all his possessions were forfeited. The system offered unlimited opportunities for loot. This source of gain largely accounts for the revolting practice of what has been called corpse trials. And that is the practice of confiscating the property of condemned heretics. It was very productive of many acts of extortion, and corruption will be doubted by no one who has any knowledge either of human nature or the historical documents. No man's wealth was safe from the avaricious grasp of the Pope. Most of Rome's wealth has been acquired through the sale of salvation. Untold billions of dollars have been paid to her by those who thought they were purchasing heaven on the installment plan, either for themselves or for loved ones. The practice continues to this day, blatantly where Catholicism is in control, and less obviously here in North America. No greater deception or abomination could be perpetrated. In addition to those perversions of the gospel which have led hundreds of millions astray, friend, there are the further abominations of corrupt banking practices, laundering of drug money, trading in counterfeit securities, and dealings with the mafia. And these are all fully documented in police and court records, which the Vatican and her representatives around the world have long employed. There was a correspondent, a journalist by the name of Nino Lobello. He's a former Business Week correspondent in Rome and Rome bureau chief for New York Journal of Commerce. He wrote that the Vatican is so closely allied with the mafia in Italy that many people there believe that Sicily is nothing more than a Vatican holding. The Roman Catholic Church is by far the wealthiest institution on earth. Yet, oftentimes you may hear from Rome periodic pleas for money persuasive appeals claiming that the Vatican cannot maintain itself on its limited budget and needs monetary assistance. Such pleas are unconscionable ploys. The value of innumerable sculptures by such masters as Michelangelo, paintings by the world's greatest artists, and countless other art treasures and ancient documents which Rome possesses, not only at the Vatican, but in cathedrals around the world. The value is beyond calculation. Christ and his disciples lived in poverty. He told his followers not to lay up treasures on this earth, but in heaven. Yet the Roman Catholic Church has disobeyed that command and has accumulated a plethora of riches without equal, of which the Roman pontiff is the supreme administrator and steward. You know, there is no church, no city, which is a spiritual entity, no religious institution, past or present, which even comes close to possessing the wealth of the Roman Catholic Church. Let me just give you an example. A recent newspaper article described only a fraction of that treasure at one location. The fabulous treasure of Lourdes, France, whose existence was kept secret by the Catholic Church for over 120 years, has finally been unveiled. Rumors have been circulating for decades about a priceless collection of gold chalices, diamond-studded crucifixes, silver, and precious stones, which were donated over the years by grateful pilgrims. And after an indiscreet remark by an employee, church authorities finally agreed to reveal part of the collection. Some floor-to-ceiling cases were opened to reveal 59 solid gold chalices, alongside rings, crucifixes, statues, and heavy gold brooches. Many of them were encrusted with precious stones. Almost hidden by the other treasures is the crown of Notre Dame de Lourdes, made by a Paris goldsmith in 1876, and studded with diamonds. Church authorities say they cannot place a value on the collection. It is of too high value. The treasure described is only part of that which is kept in one location, and that's the small town of Lourdes, France. Friend, this church is also the mother of harlots and abominations. The more one deeply probe or dig into the history of the Roman Catholic Church and its current practices, the more one is impressed with the amazing accuracy of the vision God gave to John on that rocky Isle of Patmos centuries before. John's attention is drawn to the inscription boldly emblazoned upon the woman's forehead. It says, "Mystery, Babylon, the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth." Revelation 17:5. Sadly enough, the Roman Catholic Church fits the description mother of harlots and abominations as precisely as she fits the others. Much of the cause can be traced to the unbiblical demand that her priests be celibates. The great apostle Paul was a celibate and recommended that life to others who wanted to devote themselves fully to serving Christ. However, Paul did not make it a condition for church leadership as the Roman Catholic Church has done, thereby imposing an unnatural burden on all clergy that very few of them can bear. On the contrary, the Apostle Paul wrote that a bishop should be the husband of one wife, see 1 Timothy 3:2, and also set aside requirements for elders, Titus 1:5 and 6. Peter, whom the Catholics erroneously claim was the first pope, was married. So were at least some of the other apostles. And this fact was not the chance result of their having been married before Christ called them, but it was accepted as an ongoing norm. The Apostle Paul himself argued that he had the right to marry, just like the rest of us. But the Roman Catholic Church has insisted upon celibacy, even though many popes, as well as millions of cardinals, bishops, archbishops, monks, and priests throughout history have repeatedly violated such vows. Not only has celibacy made sinners of the clergy who engage in fornication, but it makes harlots out of those with whom they secretly cohabit. Rome is indeed the mother of harlots. Her identification as such is unmistakable. No other city, church, or institution in the history of the world is her rival in this particular evil. As for abominations, even Catholic historians admit that among the popes were some of the most degenerate and unconscionable ogres in all of history. Their numerous outrageous crimes, many of which are almost beyond belief, have been recited by many historians from preserved documents that reveal the depths of papal depravity. To call any of these men His Holiness, Vicar of Christ, makes a mockery of holiness and of Christ. Yet the name of each one of these unbelievably wicked popes mass murderers, fornicators, robbers, warmongers. Some of them are guilty of the massacre of thousands, but yet still their names are emblazoned in honor on the list of popes in history. These abominations that John foresaw not only occurred in the past, but friend, they continue to this very day. Now, let's take a look at the phrase, drunk with the martyr's blood. John next notices that the woman is drunk, and not with some alcoholic beverage. She's drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. Revelation 17:6. The picture is a horrible one. It is not merely her hands that are red with this blood, but she's drunk with it. The slaughter of innocents, who for conscience' sake would not yield to her totalitarian demands, has so refreshed and exhilarated her that she reels in ecstasy. One thinks immediately of the Inquisitions, Roman Inquisition, Medieval, and Spanish Inquisition, which for centuries held Europe in their terrible grip. It is estimated that in Spain alone, the number of condemned exceeded 3 million people, with about 300,000 burned at the stake. When Napoleon Bonaparte conquered Spain in 1808, a Polish officer in his army, Colonel Lemanowski, reported that the Dominicans, who were in charge of the Inquisition, blockaded themselves in the monastery in Madrid. When Lemanowski troops forced an entry, the inquisitors denied the existence of any torture chambers. The soldiers searched the monastery and discovered the torture chambers hidden under the floors. The chambers were full of prisoners, all naked, many insane. The French troops, who were used to cruelty and the much shedding of blood, could not stomach the sight. They emptied the torture chambers, laid gunpowder to the monastery, and blew the place up. To wring out confessions from these poor creatures, the Roman Catholic Church devised ingenious tortures, so excruciating and barbarous that one is sickened by their recital. Church historian Bishop William Shaw Kerr writes, "The most ghastly abomination of all was the system of torture. The accounts of its cold-blooded operations make one shudder at the capacity of human beings for cruelty. And all this torture of innocent men and women was decreed and regulated by the popes who claimed to represent Christ on earth." The remnants of some of these chambers of horror are to be found in Europe and may be visited by people today. The torture chambers stand as memorials to the zealous outworking of Roman Catholic dogmas, which remain in force today, and to a church which claims to be infallible and to this day justifies such barbarism. There are also memorials to the astonishing accuracy of John's vision in Revelation 17. It should also be noted that thousands upon thousands of Jews and Africans who were deported from their homeland also ended up inside the horrific torture chambers of the Roman Catholic Church and the Inquisitions. In just 1 year, 1481, and just in Seville, the Holy Office of the Inquisition burned 2,000 persons, the bones and effigies of another 2,000, and another 16,000 individuals were condemned to varying sentences. A conservative figure of 50 million people died at the hands of the Catholic Church during the Dark Ages. Yet the Roman Catholic Church has never officially admitted that these practices were evil, nor has she apologized to the world or to any of the victims or their descendants. Nor could Pope John Paul II apologize today, because the doctrines responsible for those horrible things will underpin his position. Rome has not changed at heart, no matter what sweet words she speaks when it serves her purpose. Next, Let us examine how the Roman Catholic Church has spilled more blood than the pagans. Pagan Rome made sport of throwing to the lions, burning, and otherwise killing thousands of Christians and not a few Jews. Yet Christian Rome slaughtered many times that number of both Christians and Jews. Beside those of the Inquisition, there were Huguenots, Albigenses, Waldenses, and other Christians who were massacred, tortured, and burned at the stake by the hundreds of thousands simply because they refused to align themselves with the Roman Catholic Church, with its corruption, heretical dogmas, and practices. These true followers of God tried to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ independently of Rome, and for that crime they were maligned, hunted, imprisoned, tortured, and slain. Now, why would Rome ever apologize for or even admit this Holocaust? No one calls her to account for these heinous crimes today. Protestants have now forgotten the hundreds of thousands of people burned at the stake for embracing the simple gospel of Christ and for refusing to bow to papal authority. Amazingly, many Protestants are now embracing Rome as Christian, while she insists that the separated brethren be reconciled to her on her unchangeable terms. Many Protestant church leaders are intent upon working with Roman Catholics to evangelize the world. These people don't want to hear any negative reminders of the millions of people tortured and slain by the church, to which they now pay homage, or the fact that Rome has a false gospel of sacramental works. Christian Rome slaughtered Jews by the thousands, far more than pagan Rome ever did. The land of Israel was seen as belonging to the Roman Catholic Church, not to the Jews. And so in 1096, Pope Urban II inspired the First Crusade to retake Jerusalem from the Muslims. With the cross on their shield and armor, the Crusaders massacred Jews across Europe on their way to the Holy Land. Almost their first act upon taking Jerusalem for Holy Mother Church was to herd all the Jews into the synagogue and set it ablaze. Friend, these facts of history cannot be swept under the carpet of ecumenical togetherness as though they never happened. Nor can the Vatican escape considerable responsibility for the Nazi Holocaust, which was thoroughly known to Pope Pius XII, in spite of his complete silence throughout the war on that most important of subjects. I wish I had the time to delineate the involvement of Catholicism in the Holocaust. In 1936, Hitler assured the Catholic Church there was no fundamental difference between his National Socialism and the Catholic Church. Had not the Church, he argued, looked upon Jews as parasites and shut them in ghettos? I'm only doing, he boasted, what the Church has done for 1,500 years, but more effectively. The Catholic Church herself claims to be infallible, and thus her doctrines could not be wrong. The Catholic Church's involvement with Adolf Hitler and the extermination of millions of Jews could not be an admission of wrongdoing because she's supposed to be infallible. Now let's turn our attention to what the Bible says about reigning over the kings of the earth. Finally, the angel reveals to John that a woman is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Revelation 17:18. Is there such a city? Yes. And again, only one, Vatican City. Popes crowned and deposed kings and emperors, exacting obedience by threatening them with excommunication. Popes would force everyone, from the poor people to kings and magistrates, the dogma of excommunication and its consequences. Excommunication enabled the confiscation of property, often followed by imprisonment and death for the innocent. Take, for instance, Pope Martin IV placed King Pedro of Aragon under excommunication and interdict, finally declaring his kingdom forfeit. This excommunication eventually cost 2 kings of France their life, and the French nation the loss of an army. Though Pope John Paul today lacks the power to enforce such brutal excommunication claims on entire nations, his church today still retains the dogmas which authorize him to do so. And the practical effects of his power are no less than those of his predecessors, though they're exercised quietly and behind the scenes. The Vatican is the only city which exchanges ambassadors with nations, and she does so with every major country on earth. Ambassadors come to the Vatican from every major country, including the United States, not out of mere courtesy, but because the Pope is the most powerful ruler on earth today. Yes, ambassadors of nations come to Washington, D.C., to Paris, or to London, but only because the national government has its capital there. Unlike any other city on earth, the Vatican is acknowledged as a sovereign state in its own right, separate and distinct from the nation of Italy surrounding it. There is no other city in history of which this has been true, and such is still the case today. Only of the Vatican could it be said that a city reigns over the kings of the earth. So, friend, when one speaks, however, of the influence of the Vatican around the world, that is exactly what is meant: the city and the worldwide power of Roman Catholicism and its leader, the Pope. Vatican City is absolutely unique. The Vatican has been fulfilling John's vision from its location in Rome for the past 15 centuries. Moreover, there is a connection to ancient Babylon, which the Vatican has maintained down through history, in the paganized Christianity it has promulgated. You see, Babylon lay in ruins, while pagan Rome and later Catholic Rome, the New Babylon, was indeed reigning over kings. One 18th century historian counted 95 popes who claimed to have divine power to depose kings and emperors. Historian Walter James wrote that Pope Innocent III held all Europe in his net, whilst Gregory IX thundered that the Pope was Lord and master of everyone and everything. That the popes reigned over kings is an undisputed fact of history. That in so doing, horrible abominations were committed, as John foresaw. This is also indisputable. Pope Nicholas I declared, "We popes alone have the power to bind and to loose, to condemn, and Christians cannot, under penalty of excommunication, execute other judgment than ours, which alone is infallible." End quote. In commanding one king to destroy another, Nicholas wrote, and I quote, "We order you, in the name of religion, to invade his states, burn his city, and massacre his people." End quote. See, the qualifying information which John gives us under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit for identifying this woman, who is a city, is specific, conclusive, and irrefutable. There is no city upon earth, past or present, which meets all these criteria except Roman Catholic Church, or now the Vatican City specifically. That inescapable conclusion has become increasingly clear as we look for and actively await the Lord's return. That's it for this week. If you have questions or comments, please don't hesitate to write to me. Okay? So until next Sunday, remember, God loves you, for He really, really does love you.